I've been to 44 of these 50 United States. And I swear I'm going to get to all 50 before I die. But one of them that I haven't been to yet is the location of our first story. Rick is a ranger in the Washington State area. And one day he's out in the woods and he's clearing debris from trails, checking on campsites and other ranger duties. And it kind of starts to get late. So he decides, all right, I'm not going to go back to the duty station tonight. I'm just going to camp here for the night. So he starts setting up his camp, putting up his tent, starting a fire, and he gets that weird instinctual feeling that there's a predator out there somewhere. But most predators don't want anything to do with humans. So he figures he's really not in any real danger. Now the sun has set and that sky starts to turn that dark blue indigo color where you can't really see features anymore, but you can still see pretty sharp silhouettes. And Rick is looking at the tree line and he sees what looks like a huge set of shoulders and a head. And his first thought is, it's a bear standing up. I better try to spook this thing out of here. Now, bears are predators, but they really don't want anything to do with us. And if the bear knows you're there, if you start clapping and making noises, it'll usually get out of your way. So in an attempt to scare it off, he picks up a pine cone and he chucks it. And it hits this thing center mass, perfect hit, and boom, thuds to the ground. And the thing doesn't move. And he thinks, well, that's kind of weird. Well, maybe it is a tree and I just hit a branch or something. And he looks closer and he sees what he thinks almost looks like fur. But then in his head, he's thinking, well, okay, it must be a tree with moss growing on it. And that wasn't quite right either. But whatever it is, isn't fitting into any category of known items or past experiences in his brain. So he just chalks it up to being a tree because that's the closest thing his mind can grasp. And he goes back to tending his fire and getting himself some dinner. But he can't stop thinking about it. So finally, he walks back over to where he saw it and it's gone. So he's thinking it must have been a bear. But holy cow, if that was a bear, that bear has nerves of steel. How bizarre. But whatever. There's his rational explanation. So Rick spends the rest of the evening just kind of hanging out, watching his fire, watching the stars, until he decides it's about time to go to bed. So he climbs into his tent, and just as he's about to drift off to sleep, he can hear, very softly, footsteps coming toward his tent. Then he hears what sounds like fur, just barely grazing the fabric of the tent. Now he has a rifle, so he grabs it, kind of turns over on his side so he can get some leverage, and hits at it. Boom! Connects with it just square right on it. And this thing is solid. Imagine hitting a tree trunk with a bat. That's how solid this thing was. But he doesn't hear it move. No screams of pain. Nothing. Everything is dead quiet for a few seconds until he sees the impression of a 5-fingered hand pressed down on the top of his tent. He could see every finger and even hair coming off the sides through the tent fabric silhouetted by the moon. And the hand is just pressing down until he can hear the tension in the tent poles as they kind of start to creak and bend. And he is convinced this tent is going to collapse in on him. So he's laying there flat on his back in full panic mode with nowhere to go for a few agonizing seconds until the hand just gently lifts up and he can hear footsteps padding away from his campsite. So thoroughly spooked, he slowly climbs out of his tent and looks around, but he doesn't see anything. And he's thinking, okay, what are my options? I can either try to hike it back to base camp or stay for the night. It's like 2 a.m. So trying to hike out of there is probably not the best option. His best option is probably to just stick it out for the night. He rekindles his fire, sits next to that fire, holding his rifle. And at some point, he kind of dozes off because he is awakened by a little thud next to his feet. And he looks, and there are pine cones on the ground at his feet. And he's trying to shake the fog from his brain when another pine cone comes flying in and hits him on the boot. And then another one hits him on the boot. And he realizes that whatever it is sitting in the tree line just out of view, just out of sight, throwing these pine cones at him. And he is completely frozen in fear. He has no idea what to do. So he doesn't do anything. He just sits by the fire. And sometimes pine cones would launch in from the dark and hit him. And sometimes it would stop for a while. And he just sat there in front of his fire with his rifle for a couple more hours until the sun started to come up. Now, once it was light enough that you could see the trail, he got up, packed up his campsite with his rifle never more than an arm's length away, and got out of there. Now, Rick has no idea what he encountered that night, but he does know there are things in the woods that are not afraid of us. Dave is a trail ranger, which is basically just a ranger that can't get you in trouble. One day, he's out collecting illegal trail cameras, knocking down hunting stands, feeders, and blinds with another ranger. And the other ranger says, you know what, I really am not feeling so well. I'm going to head back to camp, because he knew it was going to take him like an hour to get back. So Dave says, hey, no problem. Head on back. I'm just going to finish up with this hunting stand that I've got here, and I'll be just a few minutes behind you. So his ranger buddy takes off, and he's finishing what he's doing, and he hears voices. And keep in mind, he is far off the beaten path. But he calls out to them, wondering if maybe there's somebody that needs some help, and he gets no response. So after he's done with what he was doing, he heads back to his ATV, and he realizes the ATV won't start. And he looks around and he sees that the battery cable isn't connected anymore. So he connects the battery cable, starts it up, gets on, and starts to ride. But immediately you can tell there's just something not right. It's only going at like half speed and kind of sputtering. And after about a half a mile, it just quits. So Dave radios back to base, basically saying, hey guys, somebody's got to come and pick me up. The ATV is dead. And they said, okay, no problem, but it's going to take us like an hour to get to you. And Dave asked him, did the other guy make it back yet? And they said, no, he's not back yet. So he knows it's going to be a little while. So he settles down, makes himself a little fire, and he hears the voices again. And the voices sound more like an argument now. It sounds like one person who's really angry is yelling at another person who sounds more scared. So Dave yells out, does anyone need any help? And the voices don't seem to care. They just keep on arguing. And he's guessing that they're most likely less than 1,000 feet away and most likely intoxicated. And he radios back to base, where are you guys? And they say, hey, we're having problems figuring out what trail you're on, so we haven't left yet. And Dave says, well, just get the other guy to tell you where I am. Because the other guy left with the iPad that had the map on it. And the guy at base says, he's still not back yet. A few more minutes go by, and the voices start up again. So Dave thinks, all right, I'm just going to walk over to them. Maybe I can get them to stop being idiots for long enough to at least find out if maybe they have a map. So he starts walking in their direction, but he figures out that the voices seem to be getting further away the closer that he gets. So after about 20 minutes, he just gives up and walks back. So finally, he gets a call on the radio. They say, hey, we found your partner passed out. He's on the way to the hospital right now. But we found the maps, and on the maps we can see where the stands are that you guys took out. So we kind of have a pretty good idea of where you are. And the radio dies. Then the voices come back. So Dave is just sitting there waiting for his people to come pick him up. And he decides he's going to start listening to this argument since he has nothing better to do. And he starts picking up things like, it wasn't yours to take, and I don't care, and you knew better, and so on. As far as he could tell, it sounded like two hunters that were maybe arguing over a kill. Then he hears some screaming that he couldn't quite understand, and then silence. And then bang! Dave douses his fire and hides. And after that, he hears nothing. Just his breathing for the next half an hour until he sees the ATV lights of his people coming to get him. And he tells the guy picking him up everything that he just heard. So he radios back to base to get some more people up there to start looking around. So more people come up. They are looking around for like 3 hours and they can't find anything. So they decide to just wait until they can bring the police and some canine units up there as well. So the next day, with police and canine support, after searching for about an hour, they find a shallow grave with someone in it who was clearly shot in the face. However, it's a skeleton that has been there for years. So is the argument that Dave heard that ended with a bang just a couple of drunk guys who stumbled their way home that night? Or did he hear the echoes of a murder committed long ago? Back when Craig was about 14, he and his friends Eric and Rich decided to go up to Eric's family farm up in rural New Hampshire. And he says there's really not much up there except farmland and a lot of deep woods. Now one night, it's about midnight, and the boys had just spent hours screwing around, smoking cigars, lighting a bonfire in one of the cow pastures, and they decide it's time to head back to the house. Now, to get back to the house from the pasture, you need to walk through about a half a mile of woods and across another field. And Eric's dad had a tradition of messing with them when they're on their way back. Usually, he'd be lying in wait on the porch and shoot Roman candles at them as they crossed the field. So all three start walking back. And as they emerge from the path, they start hearing rustling noises coming from the tree line about 70 yards away. So they all take off running to the middle of the field and hit the deck smiling, waiting for Eric's dad to start shooting fireworks at them. So after about 5 minutes of intermittent rustling and no Roman candles, their smiles are gone and they start debating on whether it's something like a bear or some other predator. The rustling is distinctly footsteps, and it picks up and suddenly stops as if something is running from tree to tree. Thoroughly freaking out, Eric pulls out his cell phone and dials the landline at his house. He stands up and he walks a little ways away in the direction of his house, while Craig and Rich stay lying down, staring in the direction of the noises. Suddenly, something runs out of the tree line, and they're only about 50 yards away from it, but there's only a crescent moon, so there isn't a whole lot of light to make out any fine detail. But what he saw, Craig says he will remember for the rest of his life. He and Rich watch as this inhumanly tall thing strides out onto a portion of the field and then back into the trees. It's skinny with disproportionately long limbs, and in the dark looks to be like a white or gray color. And as it runs, its incredibly long arms and legs move in this disturbingly unusual way. And it appears to be moving much faster than it should be. And as fast as it had appeared, it disappeared back into the woods. Craig and Rich look at each other in silent horror. And they stand up, ready to book it back to the house. And that's when Eric walks back to them, completely oblivious to what they had just seen, and says, "My dad picked up. He says he's been in bed for an hour." Without saying anything, Craig and Rich just start sprinting for their lives back to the house. And Eric has no idea what's going on, so he just follows. They all make it back into the house, lock the doors, and tell Eric and his dad what they have just seen. None of them slept that night. And when they go downstairs in the morning, Eric's dad, whose bedroom is on the ground floor of the house, tells the boys that throughout the night he was hearing banging on the side of the house and the window, and claims he went outside several times with his shotgun to see nothing. And the boys thought Eric's dad was just messing with him at the time. But to this day, Eric's dad stands by that story. Now, as someone who doesn't really believe in the paranormal, Craig really doesn't tell this story to too many people. But he and Eric and Rich talk about it all the time, and it still scares the crap out of them. But just this year, Craig shared his story with a buddy of his who loves the creepy and paranormal. And after a quick Google search, shows Craig a number of images and links to something called a wood devil. And when Craig saw those images, he nearly lost it. The description and depiction of those images was exactly what he saw. He honestly doesn't know what to believe, but he knows what he saw. And it's safe to say you will never catch him in the woods of New Hampshire after dark. And some bonus creepiness to this story, the land adjacent to Eric's family's farm has been known locally as Bones Wood or Devil's Wood for all of the several generations that his family has been there. Might have been nice to know that ahead of time. So that is it for today's creepy true stories, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to them as much as I enjoyed telling them. And I also have to say a big thanks to all you guys who are watching. This is only our 8th episode. It's a brand new channel, so we weren't really sure when we started just a few weeks ago how it was going to go over. But you guys have just blown us away with all of your support and positive comments and feedback. It has been wonderful. Thank you so much. We look forward to producing many more episodes for you. Now, if anybody out there has a story that they would like to have told, feel free to email us at inbetweentales@gmail.com. And if you need some more spooky stories, these will make sure you don't sleep tonight. We'll see you next time on the In Between.